Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Texas City Tales. I'm Jennifer.
And I'm Ramari.
And today we're here with Jessie from the Resource and Crisis Center of Galveston County. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you guys for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
Yeah. So I know that October is Domestic Violence Awareness Month. The Mayor Johnson, just proclaimed it here in Texas City officially as well. So what do you hope that month will accomplish? Like, if you could have people do something or learn something, what would your goal be, or what would you suggest?
Really, I like to focus on the dynamics of domestic violence as well as the prevention efforts. That's really what I would ask our community to focus on. Mm-hmm. Just kind of learning what goes into the relationship, what keeps victims from leaving, what keeps victims from reaching out for help. Because it can make a big difference if our community comes together and starts talking about it. Because when you make a space for the conversation, that allows the victims to be able to find the safe space to be able to talk about what they're going through, mm-hmm. get resources that they need. And for prevention efforts, that's really focusing on what can we do as a community to come together to prevent these things from happening. And really that focuses on our youth. So teaching our youth about healthy relationships, teaching our youth about, what are the dynamics of an unhealthy relationship? What are red flags in a relationship? I work with a lot of the youth in our shelter, mm-hmm. and I like to talk about the first 3 months of a relationship. Okay. The first 3 months, we call those the honeymoon period. Mm-hmm. That's usually when you want to show your best self to somebody. Mm-hmm. And so whenever you're only showing your best self, you're missing a lot of the things that could go wrong after those 3 months, mm-hmm. after you've already been with them for a long period of time, maybe made some long-term commitments with them. And it's not just youth that have to worry about this. This is also for adults. But for prevention, teaching them before they go into a relationship to watch out for those first 3 months, watch out for those red flags, it can do a lot of good mm-hmm. in terms of making sure that they don't enter into any abusive relationships in the future, and also keeping abusers from, continuing that cycle, because it usually is generational. Unfortunately, kids learn what they see, mm-hmm. and then they continue those behavioral patterns. So
right, because if that's what they've been into them, that's what's normal, and that's exactly. That makes sense. Mm-hmm. So sorry,
no, it's okay. Go ahead.
What are some of the red flags? Like, what types of behavior are you guys helping kids learn about?
Well, I like to focus on isolation. That's usually what you see first. You mm-hmm. see them not wanting them to not wanting their significant other to hang out with friends, to hang out with family members, even if they've been friends with that person for 10 plus years. Mm-hmm. You see a lot of jealousy, a lot of anger around that. And it usually, again, it starts really small, and it's always going to start small and build up over time. And that's why it's harder to notice in those first 3 months. Mm-hmm. So it could start off as simple as, oh, you know what, I really don't like them because I just don't like how they speak to you. Even if you don't notice anything change in behavior, it's usually the abuser or the person that wants to isolate that notices something wrong with the behavior mm-hmm. of their friends or their family. And then because it's your significant other, of course you want to respect their feelings, their boundaries, but it starts slow, and so it's mm-hmm. one isolation after the next. That's one really big one. Minimizing and denying, that's another really big one. So say that you tell your partner, hey, I'm not really comfortable with you doing X, Y, Z. Mm-hmm. And then they're like, oh, you're just making a really big deal out of it. I hear that a lot with teens, mm-hmm. so much. But that's your partner not taking in your feelings into consideration. And again, it starts small, but then it builds up over time. Mm-hmm. Usually with domestic violence, you're going to see the same tactics. It's force, fraud, and coercion. And then that even continues into adult relationships as well. But again, when you build it up over a small time, and then you're in that relationship with that person 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, and then all of a sudden at 3 years, you look around, you don't have any friends or family around you. Right. You don't know how to talk to your partner anymore because they've either completely ignored your feelings. And then if you do want to try to reach out, who do you reach out to if you've already been isolated? Mm-hmm. You don't know who you can talk to because your partner won't talk to you. And then it's a matter of, oh, well, I have to figure out the resources for myself. Mm-hmm. And when you're going against the known versus the unknown, you'll hear me say that a lot when I talk about domestic violence, because the unknown is the shelter. Mm-hmm. We have a 55-bed shelter at on Galveston Island, and it does a lot of good, but it's not enough space. But when you talk about a shelter, you're going to be living with strangers. You're going to be coming into an environment where it is built for your safety and your protection. So we have systems in place that can feel a little bit restricting. You get curfews. We have to check your things for the safety of clients as well as other people coming into the shelter. And that's a lot of unknowns for somebody who maybe has already been in this relationship for 2-3 years, knows how their abuser is going to respond to whatever triggers them. And then if you've already been living in that for 3 years, that's your safety, that's your comfort. Maybe you have kids, maybe you don't, but that's the no. So how do you convince them to come into a shelter after they've already been isolated from friends and family, after they don't know anybody who they can talk to or trust, and then they have to come into a completely unknown situation and live with other strangers? So I like to focus on all of those things, because if people know about shelters, they know about the restrictions, they know about, you know, the dynamics. If family members knew about the dynamics, then they can usually step in and be the bystander, because I talk about bystander intervention. If you see something, say something. That's a really big thing for domestic violence. Yeah.
Along those lines, like if you see something, say something, what are things that other people can be looking out for as flags?
So any aggressive behavior. So when I see in grocery stores maybe a significant other, it seems like a significant other partnership going on, and something seems off, stick with your gut. Your gut is going to be your biggest friend in this. If you see something in the community and you're just like, that just doesn't leave me with a good taste in my mouth, try to see if there's a chance to go up and speak to that person individually. Don't try to speak to them with their partner right there next to them, because that's not going to be any help to them. But if for whatever reason their partner walks away and you have 5 seconds to go up and say, hey, I know of this resource in our community and I don't like how he's treating you, and I don't want you to have to be treated like this anymore. You don't have to go fully into the resources. Just be that person that reaches out. Maybe if you know a resource, write it down, hand it to her, let her know that it's a shelter, and let him know that it's a shelter, because we do also accept men. That's a really great way to step in, because it lets them know, like, hey, I'm seeing how you're being treated, and I don't want you to be treated that way as a stranger, you know, let alone a friend or a family member who could maybe step in and actually have a one-on-one conversation with them.
That's good advice. I think in this day and age, people are sometimes so leery of getting involved. But the way that you put it is so simple. You don't have to make it into like the super drawn out conversation or, you know, make it into an aggressive, like, let me jump in and save you right in the moment. But if I can just pass you a piece of paper with the information of contacting the Resource and Crisis Center of Galveston County, then that might be enough.
Yeah. It starts really small on our end of things. You know, for prevention efforts, it really didn't start until the early 2000s. So when you're looking at that, as well as the history of shelters, where, you know, one of the first Texas shelters didn't open up until the 70s, we're only operating, we're only operating on about 50 years of service for our community in Texas. And when we're looking at murder rates for women and men in our community, when we're looking at domestic violence rates, and it might seem like it doesn't affect it, or it only affects one community. It's a complete lie. It affects every community. You know, we had the TCFV, or the Texas Council on Family Violence. They release the October domestic violence murder counts in October of every year for Domestic Violence Awareness Month. For 2023, I think the youngest victim was around 11 and the oldest was around 70.
Wow.
So when you're looking at that, it affects quite a big demographic. It's not just the young or the old. It's not just the poor or the rich. It's everybody. So when you think about it in terms of, like, let me just pass off a card. Let me just pass off a number. It opens up that door for victims, and it makes the process a little bit easier for them. When I think about, you know, prevention efforts, since it's only been a short while, you know, we have to think of things in small ways that we can build our community up to do the bigger things. When I think about community, you know, for domestic violence specifically, it's still a very taboo subject. It's still very much that's left for the family to handle behind closed doors, and that's just not true. We know that one of the first, I would say, not state certified shelters, but one of the first shelters that opened up in Texas was run by a woman who just wanted to make sure that in her community, the other ladies who didn't feel safe had a place to go to, had a safe space. And it's just about making that safe space within our community.
Yeah, a safe space and a judgment-free, like you said, there's no shame. It's not, isolated to one type of group or person, Yeah, I think that's really powerful too. Like the advice for, the scenario in the grocery store, like that's 5 seconds out of your day, but it could change someone's entire world.
Yeah, it really can.
So I know that we're talking about October and domestic violence, but at the shelter, is it only specific to domestic violence or people that are experiencing domestic violence, or is it all crisis?
So we handle all issues with domestic violence, sexual assault, child abuse, and human trafficking. Okay. Houston is a part of the trafficking triangle. Most people don't know that. So we're part of Dallas, Houston, and San Antonio's trafficking triangle. We'll see victims come in for 2 years, and then they'll be usually moved out after 2 years by their abuser to a different city. So it's really hard to help trafficking victims. We also have the ports. We have I-45 and I-10, that cross-section. And then we also have Hobby and International Airport, Bush. So we're a major hub. For child abuse, we do help individuals who are seeking resources, referrals for child abuse. We work really closely with the Child Advocacy Center because they have forensic specialists who actually help out children specifically, while we work with UTMB and Houston Methodist for our sexual assault nurse examinations. We don't perform them ourselves, but we work with the hospitals who do. And then we also do for sexual assault. So we do medical accompaniments, court accompaniments. Basically, anybody who is fleeing for their own safety, they can call us. And we serve all of Galveston County, and we're the only domestic violence and sexual assault shelter. So when I say we've got 55 beds and they're not enough, it's not enough, you guys.
Yeah, absolutely. So what sort of resources do you have aside from the shelter? So if someone needs help, like I know there's a crisis hotline that's 24 hours.
Yes, ma'am. I love our crisis hotline. That one is open 24/7, 365 days a year. We're open Christmas, we're open Valentine's Day, it doesn't matter, And I will say the numbers get bigger during holiday times because you have to add on the stressors. We also do case management, both residential and non-residential, so within our shelter and outside. We do prevention education classes for our community as well as our staff, as well as our clients. That's really my main job, is going out into the community, talking about prevention education efforts. It's really interesting, that part. We also do, besides the case management, we also do the medical and court accompaniments. So whenever a victim goes to the hospitals to get a sexual assault nurse examination, one of the first things that the nurses will ask is, do you want an advocate present? So if they say yes, then we have to be out at the hospitals within an hour, and we sit with them throughout the entire process. And then that advocate is assigned that case. And so throughout their process, whether they are needing the referrals in between for legal, for medical, basically anything within the realm of their individual needs, because it's always a case-by-case basis, we'll sit with them through that process. And that's a really big key for victims to not have to be re-traumatized over and over again. Unfortunately, victims have to share their story quite a few times. They have to share it with their lawyers, they have to share it with the same examiners, and they have to share it also with the police officers if they do choose to report, because not everybody does choose. It's quite a bit of a process, but when you have that person that is familiar with their case, has sat with them already through almost all of the hard experiences, it makes it a little bit easier because they're not having to go through it alone. And we also hold beds at our shelter. So if they are needing shelter right after they leave that hospital, then we have a space available for them. We also hold our SART and DART meetings at our agency. So SART is the sexual assault response team, and DART is the domestic abuse response team. That's where we have all the local DAs, the local police officers that handle all sexual assault and domestic violence cases, as well as the SANE nurse examiners. They're the actual nurses that go in and then perform these exams every day, as well as our advocates. We meet usually bi-weekly at our agency to hold meetings to talk about the cases within our county. This basically lets everybody who needs to know have that information right there and ready. We can all talk about it within a group, and then that also saves the victim from having to share her story over and over again, because you've got the advocate there who's been through the entire process. You've got the SANE nurse there who gave the exam. You've got the DA who's going to take care of the case, and you've also got the police officer who took the report. It just saves a lot of time, a lot of energy, and it also gets the victim through the justice system a lot faster, because we know that victims usually have to wait for justice, unfortunately. So we do quite a bit at RCC. I love what we do. I've been in this field for about 8 years now, and it really does make a difference. I've seen women travel cross-state to get back to family. I've seen women be able to start jobs with full-time kids in school, needing to have, a 3-bedroom apartment in Galveston as a single mom, which is not easy sometimes. But I've seen ladies be able to build their strong foundations because of the systems that you have in place to protect those victims. And it's a good feeling. You see a lot of bad. I'm not going to negate that, but the work that we do and the work that I see our community doing, this is why I'm so big on prevention, because I see how well it does for the ladies, for our men in our community. So really happy about that.
So if someone is watching this and they're either a victim of domestic violence, or they think that, maybe there's a potential that it's escalating, like what would your advice be for them?
So the most dangerous time for a woman to leave is actually when she's leaving. That's usually when you see the abuser make extreme incidents of violence. That's when we see it. So we always ask them, if you're thinking about leaving, do not tell your abuser. Call us, make a safety plan. The first thing that they're going to talk to you about in a safety plan is the go bag. That means that all of your important documents, maybe a burner phone, because the first 2 things that your abuser will destroy is your phone and your government documents. And that keeps you from being able to go certain places. It keeps you from being able to get a job, and it gets them right back to their abuser. So make a go bag of all your important documents, your birth certificate, your passport, your driver's license, your kids' school documents. Have a burner phone, have a couple of days worth of clothing and food, as well as make sure that you have car keys in there, an extra set of car keys. Because usually whenever a woman goes back into the house because an incident has occurred and she's finally fleeing, she'll go back into the house for all 3 of the important documents, the car keys, and the phone, and that's when something serious usually happens. So don't tell your partner. Call us beforehand, make a safety plan, make sure you know who you can go to after you leave, and then just set those things up for yourself beforehand so you don't get harmed during the process, because it's going to be the most dangerous time is when she's leaving. So
that's great advice.
Thank you for that.
Yeah, absolutely, y'all.
For those that are listening that want to get involved with Resource and Crisis Center of Galveston County, and they don't know how, whether it be like monetary or volunteering, how can they?
So all you have to do is go to our rccgc.org page, and we have a volunteer sign-in sheet. So you just have to fill that out, send it over to us. Once we've got that application in place, we'll call you. We'll ask you, where do you want to volunteer at? You can volunteer in our shelter. You can volunteer in our retail stores. You can volunteer just helping out, cleaning up our campus, making sure that it's nice and pretty for our ladies. We take any type of monetary donations. We're always looking for things in need. We have an urgent needs list usually on our social media pages. We're active on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, YouTube. We've got everything, you guys. But really, if you want to volunteer, come check out our local page. Send in an application. We'll talk to you. I will say though, if you do want to do any direct volunteering, that would be direct services with our clients, then they do have to go through usually about a 2-hour orientation. But I go through the dynamics with them. I go through the prevention and the code of ethics with our clients, as well as confidentiality, because, you know, if they're in our shelter, then they're actively fleeing and we need to protect their privacy.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I love that question because I'm always looking for volunteers.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you for telling us all the ways that we can help out and kind of what to watch for. Is there anything else that you would just like to make sure people know?
We've got our 24/7 crisis hotline. If anybody is in need of a call or if they just need somebody to talk to, again, you can call at 2 a.m. and we'll be ready to talk to you, plan things out, or even just be that shoulder to cry on. We'll be there for anything. All right.
That's awesome. Thank you for all the work you do.
Yeah, thank you,
guys.
Jessie. We appreciate it. Again, this is Jessie with the Resource and Crisis Center of Galveston County, Inc. Thank you to the City of Texas City for sponsoring this podcast. You can catch new episodes on Wednesdays on the city's Facebook page, YouTube, or wherever podcasts are streamed. Till next time, bye.